Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Let's Get Digital, Leverage Application-Based Activities in Economics to Improve Student Engagement. Thank you for taking the time out today and for being here. I'm Lula March. I'm part of the economics team here at McGraw-Hill, Canada, and I'm excited to be hosting this session. Today, McGraw-Hill is hosting various sessions for business, economics, computing, and student success faculty. In fact, many of you may be joining one or more of our sessions today. All of the recordings from today's sessions will be uploaded on our registration page. Here, you can have access to all the day's recordings and watch on demand at your convenience. Please note the registration page will be updated at the end of the day, and you can view the recordings at that time. You'll also receive a follow-up email with instructions on how to access these recordings. This follow-up email will also provide you with the option of downloading a professional development certificate that shows that you have participated in today's event. So before we jump into today's main topic, there are a couple housekeeping items. First, today's session is 45 minutes in length. As we have a large group today, your lines are muted and the videos are deactivated to really ensure the best webinar experience. So for questions, please, we encourage you to use the Q&A and we'll take them up at the end of the session. After today's webinar, you'll also receive an email that will include a post-survey link. Your feedback and suggestions are really helpful to us as we determine other webinar sessions that will suit your interests. So with that, I am pleased to introduce today's speakers. We have with us Amanda Freeman. Amanda Freeman has taught at Kansas State University since 2006, most frequently principles classes, both macro and micro, and money and banking. She specializes in online instruction and course design, as well as development of educational materials, and acts as an advisor to new teaching assistants, both online and offline. And we've also got Kim Brewster with us today. Kim has over 30 years experience in both legal and academic publishing at Butterworth, LexisNexis, and McGraw-Hill Education in roles ranging from researcher, legal editor, managing editor, content developer, acquisitions editor to publisher. She also currently teaches at the Chang School of Business at Ryerson University. Kim currently heads up customer research and insights at McGraw-Hill, Canada. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Kim to begin the session.
Share my screen. Okay. And sorry. Slideshow. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'd like to just give you a quick bit of background on this research. This took place pre-COVID, but we had 20 instructors who took part in 1 hour, one-on-one contextual insight interviews. We did 14 of those in person and we did 6 by WebEx. And we had a pretty even split of 8 universities and 7 colleges and 7 qualitative subjects and 6 quantitative subjects. We used a consistent set of preliminary questions around what experiential learning means to instructors and how they were implementing it in their classrooms, what some of their challenges were and their needs, and the resources they were using. And then we actually observed them creating and using those tools. So I will go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. There we go. So these terms are often used interchangeably. So for our purposes, we defined experiential learning as learning by doing through an experience. So that needs to incorporate 4 learning modes: the hands-on experience, the reflection, the integration of the experience with previous learning, and the opportunity to test those new ideas. So the instructor's role here is to provide the experience, and that's what we were talking about in our research, as compared to active learning, where the instructor includes the activities, but the learner actually takes the responsibility for the degree to which they process that information. So learning by doing, what do these experiences look like? We really want to immerse the students in a real world scenario, make it relevant and practical so that they can apply their knowledge and practice those skills. So the goals of experiential learning, as we defined it, were to provide the students with an opportunity to improve their critical thinking skills, but also to improve their engagement and motivation by making it relevant and something that applies to their life. And hopefully this will result in improved critical thinking and development of analytical skills, but also really important workplace skills. And the characteristics of some of these activities is that they're highly interactive and they provide a safe space for students to practice without consequence. Applying the learning and problem solving skills to real world scenarios, and also addressing the key concepts and skills and the learning objectives of the course, and also to work through some course specific problems. So if we were looking at the Kolb learning cycle, which many of you may be familiar with, we're talking about starting with a concrete experience. So having that experience and then reflecting on it, concluding and learning by that experience, and then actually trying out what you've learned. And what are instructors looking for? Why do they want experiential learning? We asked them, out of 20, 14 of them were teaching face-to-face, and then there was a mix with some online courses and hybrid courses. Of course, if we asked them today, those numbers would look much different. But when we asked, is experiential learning necessary in your course, 17 said yes. Not just in all semesters, not just in first year, but in all semesters. And it seemed more so in the qualitative courses. For instance, when we talked to an OB instructor, they said, when it's on paper, it's a theory. It doesn't really hit home until the student feels it or they're affected by it, then they get it. Excuse me. And when we asked, is it a necessity in higher learning in general, 18 said yes. It seemed to be a bit more needed in the colleges based on what we were hearing. We see Humber College making experiential learning a strategic priority at their school, in Niagara College developing an experiential toolkit. But I really loved the quote that ship has sailed. You know, we're not just lecturers anymore. We're not entertainers either, but we have to engage. We have to bring this to life for the students. So when we ask what they're looking for in experiential resources, we see a lot of, we want auto assessment. So how do we know the students have learned and how can they apply what they've learned? We want them to be able to build skills, real world skills and employability skills. Providing that safe environment where they can learn through trial and error, of course, is important. And developing and assessing critical thinking skills, student success skills and learning strategies. And then some of the others were augmenting the classroom environment, giving them something a little bit different, increasing collaboration and engagement, communication, troubleshooting and problem solving are all things that instructors are looking for help. Excuse me. So to revisit a previous student focus group, one of the quotes I really liked from a student was that they really like the applied classes where they discuss scenarios compared to classes where they have to memorize formulas and theories. They said, I feel like these classes are missing context, that we're studying about things that are happening in a perfect world, which I know isn't the case. And so when we provided this quote to our instructors, 18 of them said, yes, this is very typical of my students. They need concrete examples to internalize these concepts. We bring in guest speakers and that helps. Another instructor said, my entire role at Fleming College was created in order to help students have these relevant real world experiences, especially the first year students, because when you look at the level that they're at, they are not quite learning for the sake of learning yet. They need that practical component to interest them and engage them. So what are some of the challenges? It's funny there's no big surprises here, but many of these challenges are the same challenges that you're experiencing now with forced remote teaching. Of course, time is a challenge and lack of critical thinking, workload, competing responsibilities, large classes, resource availability, young demographic with no work experience. So to, for them to understand an IB or even an economics experience, if they don't have that experience, it's a lot tougher to get that through. So this slide was the most interesting one to me, because we talked to each of the instructors about how they are driving experiential learning in their teaching. And so we divided into the classroom and groups outside the classroom and the community. And the ones on the left are the ones that are most often used by these instructors. So writing business or marketing plans and case studies, current events discussion, bringing in news headlines, a video, reflection and critiques, and guest speakers and hands-on labs. Not anything too surprising there, but some really unique ones. On the right-hand side, we saw storytelling practice, which I know we use in our company, and it's a really great business skill. And elevator pitch development, which is maybe a newer technique, but also a really interesting business skill. When you put the students in groups, they're looking at group analysis and discussion, presentations and projects, role-playing, case studies, flashcards are still used, and group simulations. On the right-hand side, you see a couple newer ones, like, here's an article, let's make it go viral. What hashtags are you going to use? Let's look at this meme that, is flying around social media. Let's critique that, and how could we make it better? Or how could we make it more practical? Campus observation was another one, where they had students walking around and observing other students, observing interactions on campus, having conversations. Outside the classroom, we saw some reflection exercises, smart book used at home for homework, video analysis, simulations, field trips. One of our instructors talked about taking their students to the Amazon Fulfillment Center to look at supply chain, which was pretty fascinating. One on the right-hand side that I thought was really cool was the opportunity cost of university education, where an instructor actually had the students figure out how much they were paying, or their parents were paying, for their education, and then breaking that down by class. So he could say at the end of the class, did you get your money's worth from me today, from my class? What is that opportunity cost that you're paying, and what are you getting out of it? And in the community, co-ops and placements, apprenticeships, work study, obviously really tough experiences to be getting during COVID. And we see some educational experience suffering. If we break those down into types of experiential learning, exposure exercises, like what we talked about with guest speakers, application for a case study in the lab or a community project, simulation is of a real problem. So maybe a model UN for your students, or interviewing a patient if you're in a medical. Service is doing something for the community. So maybe it's helping kids, and community engagement is working in partnership. So some kind of practicum or co-op or placement. Lots of different ways to classify this experiential learning and these exercises. And so these are the disciplines that we had in the study. And so economics was one of them. We had 3 instructors who were economics teachers, and they talked about using running cases and journals, Excel spreadsheets, interactive lectures, and pulling in economist videos and articles. And a couple of them were also using this website, the Pedagogy in Action, for interactive learning in economics. And you can see all the other different tools for different disciplines. And, maybe not so much in economics, but sometimes I get students to sing songs or improvise a skit and show my vulnerability, not entertaining, but engaging. And there's so many resource examples to look at. So many institutions have built these amazing resource hubs, and there's so much out there now, and different ways to explore and learn from your peers. So I hope that you are taking advantage of all that information. So some key takeaways from our research is that the instructors are really looking for help with experiential learning and active learning, game-based learning. Help us innovate. We need tools, we need products, we need technology. That's what we're looking for help with. Looking at different pathways to learning is a great approach. Adaptive for some. It helps to alleviate cheating and demonstrates there's positive consequences to choice. There's not always only one path. It's not simply right or wrong. There's different ways to get there. Relatability to student experiences is essential. They're not always going to see that path, that this is the learning and it's going to lead here post-education. So they'll learn better when they can make that connection. Also, we heard that feedback is often more acceptable from a social source, and maybe a lot of parents wouldn't be surprised to hear that, but the source seems more valid if it comes from an action to the experience, even stronger if that feedback is customized. And great news for these days that online environments are ideal for this type of self-learning, and personas and gaming experiences where they can play a role in a safe environment is really helpful. So that's it for my time. Thanks for listening. I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Hi there, I'm Amanda Freeman, and I'm going to be talking to you today. I'm one of the developers of these economics application-based activities, and I thought I would walk you through a few of them, talk to you about the development process and what they can do in the classroom, and then perhaps go in detail through one of them as well. So in order to start off here, I thought that I wanted to share a little bit of information about myself. I know Lula already did that a bit. I've taught for K-State for 15 years now, and I am probably a bit unique among the faculty in that my entire focus is teaching materials, getting new TAs in the classrooms, and I've been doing this for, I added that up the other day, almost 15 years. And in doing that for 15 years, there's a couple of insights that I've definitely gotten and that have informed my development of materials. One that I want to talk about today for sure is that many problems that students experience in an econ class have little to nothing to do with economics. They are math prereqs, they are lack of comfort with graphs, but we have limited time in the classroom to address these issues, and it can be difficult to tell the difference between where an economics problem stops and other problems begin. Similarly, as we discussed with experiential learning and active learning, students need hands-on time with this stuff. And even in the very beginning, even before we start telling them, the law of demand or how a market works or whatever, to start that understanding process, I find students need as much hands-on time as possible. And many of those students who need that hands-on time, they won't ask for it. Even if they come to me and ask, why is my grade where it is, it's sometimes difficult for them to say, I need to spend another half hour talking about this. And even for those students who are willing to do it, again, there are time constraints. Therefore, I find it's always worth learning a new approach for students, a new way to explain something, a new way to have them go through stuff. And so as I worked with McGraw-Hill developing these application-based activities for economics, I had some basic goals in mind. I wanted to create these application-based activities that we could use for addressing inconsistencies or deficiencies and prereqs, not only to save time in the classroom, but to let the teacher know where something is going wrong, allow students to spend as much time as they need with a concept. If half of the class understands it, but the other half doesn't, I want to accommodate both halves. That was very important to me. And I wanted to make sure that even a student who is too shy or reluctant or whatever to come forward and ask questions, make sure those materials are available for them as well. And I want to provide as many different approaches as possible. So for the rest of my time talking today, I'm going to show you some excerpts from the activities that we've developed and how we approach them with an idea of solving a certain classroom problem we were dealing with. So this very first one here, this first set, and I have to apologize right off the bat because the very first one I'm going to show you is not published yet. It's very close, but if I'm being honest, it's a little bit of my baby. We're very proud of it, so they let me show it a bit today. This is in the publishing process and should be available very soon. These in the first set here are going to address prereqs and non-econ problems in the classroom. And those of you who teach econ, you know right away that a lot of that has to do with graphs. Over 15 years teaching, talked to students a great deal about graphs, and what I found is that a lot of what they have problems with, they're not even mathematical properties of graphs, it's the intuition behind a graph. So in this particular sim here, this is our graphs, slopes, and curves activity. This is addressing the fact that students could range from very high comfort levels to really very low comfort levels. And this activity walks people through the process of graphs from the very beginning. We even start outside of economics, saying, take two variables like calories consumed and average BMI. How do you think they would relate? We walk through an upward sloping curve, indicates a direct relationship. We can go point by point in a way that is difficult at best to do in the classroom. Similarly, from this same activity here, walking students through, once they've described the relationship between variables, which once again, some students are very comfortable with that, some students not at all comfortable with that. So either way, we have this material available for them. Another thing that we saw is even if students are comfortable with things like upward sloping graphs, downward sloping graphs, general relationships, that whole type of thing, very often I found that my students couldn't read information from a graph. They had trouble, for example, seeing that at point A, that would be a price of 32 and a quantity demanded of 4. So in our in our activity now, which is available, demand versus quantity demanded, one of the biggest sticking points in any principles of econ class, that whole difference between a movement along a curve and a shift of a curve. We walk through this step by step, literally building a demand curve point by point, walking them through what the downward slope means, every bit of detail we can work in there, serving almost as a virtual office hour. And probably of all the things that these activities can do, I maybe might get the most excited about these because there is nothing else I see out there offered by publishers, anything like that. So this first group, I get pretty excited about it. The second group of sims I wanted to look at today are those that give students time. And especially now that I'm teaching online full time, I see the time constraints that students face, not just being parents or members of the military or students in other majors or whatever, but it takes time to grasp concepts, and many of them have a lot of stress and a lot of things sort of demanding their time. They feel like their class time is a bit of a rush. And I like them having the ability, even if it's at 2 in the morning when the kids are put away or whatever, to be able to work through things slowly. So this next set of activities I want to show kind of emphasize the idea of letting students work through complex subjects at their own pace. This one here is from our real and nominal value sim here. The fact is students always want more practice problems. I can't tell you how many practice problems my students want, even when probably they've mastered the concept or there's something else they should be looking at. But I like that idea of offering them nearly infinite practice if they want it, just difficult to get the materials. Because we use algorithmic variables in many, not all, but many of these sims, you get that idea of infinite practice, right? Infinite approaches for those students who want as much practice as possible. And because of how we've set these up, we have detailed feedback for every single question specific to that question, even in an algorithmic scenario. So we can walk students through that and get all the benefit from that that we need. Or in this case, this is our GDP walkthrough sim, another one I'm very proud of here. Here, the idea is just giving students time and a conversational environment to talk things through. And we can't come up with completely organic, natural situations, but by having interaction between an econ tutor and student, and my macro examples, a lot of time it's the king of a kingdom and his subjects. These conversations give students time to sort of work with material in great detail. I think we've also done at least a fairly good job of guessing a lot of frequently asked questions, so we can address those there as well. And then the last group of sims I wanted to look at here via screenshots before there is one I wanted to look at in some detail is the idea of diversifying approaches. And also, I guess maybe I would add in here having some amount of responsiveness to change in the outer world. Almost as soon as the COVID-19 pandemic began, we started talking in our little econ group about how we could apply this to things that principal students were learning. And what you can see on your screen here, this is our first, we're working on a second one now. This is our first economics of a pandemic sim here, applying long run equilibrium principles to hand sanitizer in this case. Our next one is actually focusing on labor markets with COVID-19. Or in this last one I wanted to show you, this is the idea of converting values over time with the CPI. In many textbooks and classrooms, it gets covered very quickly. You don't get a lot of time to work with it. This has students do what I think is the major application of transforming values over time, comparing movie box office over time, right? Give students as much hands-on practice as they want with these materials. So as much as we can address just those time needs, those different approaches, all of those things together, it's a very unique product from that point of view. I don't see anything else really combining these. And so what I would like to do for the rest of the time that I have before I just talk and talk forever is look at one of these application-based activities in a little bit more detail. And I'm going to do that. Hopefully it's going to work right now. Yeah, the one that you can see right now, this is our savings and lending sim. And this is really designed to be sort of moving out of discussion of GDP. We're assuming students have probably discussed calculation of GDP in the most basic terms by this point. And now we're getting to a relatively common topic in the macro or micro principles class, the idea, maybe more macro, I should say, the idea of national savings and how that communicates into national investment. So I wanted to show you a couple of these things that I've pointed out before as they exist in action in this sim. First of all, within our limited abilities here, we try to have as many different scenarios as possible. And in this savings and lending sim, you can see that we've got a little island nation here. The island nation is so small, it doesn't trade. We've got a conversation going on between an economics consultant for that nation and a student who has some general econ questions. And what we're going to see here is, once again, like I said, a bunch of different approaches in the whole sim. Like we start off here with a pretty straightforward multiple choice type question asking what's included in GDP. And of course, if the student gets that incorrect and submits it, we can see we've got feedback, in this case, sort of just correcting their thinking on that one. If students are not getting this information via multiple choice, or just to make sure that they're really mastering it, we have a different question type immediately following. This is talking about measuring GDP using different approaches. And you can see here we've got sort of a select all of the above or categorization type question here, trying to figure out what's included in the expenditure approach versus, say, the income approach. And no matter the question type here, students are going to receive feedback whether their responses were correct or incorrect. Once we get past this sort of review type stuff about GDP, we move into more of a conversational approach. And we've got two characters here that are talking about various concepts. We review the concept of a closed economy, for example. We go through the idea of net exports being zero when you don't have any imports or exports. Once again, these are all things, 15 years of teaching, I wrote down as things students asked me quite a lot, and we tried to build them in here. And eventually, through this process of talking our way through, we're going to get to some math type questions. And in those math type questions, once again, we're trying, even within a single math question, to present the data as many different ways as we can. I think probably every teacher in a field related to applied math has heard a student say, I'm good at math, I'm not good at word problems. And you realize that's probably a little concerning. You want to tell, well, where does problems with math end? And problems with getting the right data begin. And by having information here, both in the table and here in conversational format, if a student is struggling, I think that's going to assist with teachers knowing where that problem comes from. If a student misses a question here, they're going to get feedback reminding them of the formula that they use, and then giving them that correct figure. And I won't keep you guys forever walking you through the entirety of this, but you can see we move from talking about calculating GDP to talking about what goes into savings. And here we find, I think, another strength of these activities as well is that I hear a lot of cynicism from students who hear different phrasing of things in different textbooks and authors, what they hear on the news. I really like in my classes to address different ways things could be phrased, different ways things could be calculated. I want to get everybody on the same page so they can apply things from my classroom elsewhere. And here's an example here. Some classes, when they're calculating public savings, they use a calculation of net taxes. They remove transfer payments. Some textbooks don't do that. We want to get all our students on the same page. So no matter what the background is here, we have our economics consultant walk the student through the definition of net taxes and then calculate those net taxes and then bring them into their discussion further, into their calculations. So for the remainder of this sim, then we work through these calculations. If the question is missed, we can return students to an earlier point, ask them to try the calculation again, remind them of definitions. That constant sort of responsiveness, that idea of having many, many resources to address many, many different ways that things could go or ways that students could learn, especially with COVID now, but just in general, as we're moving more to an online environment, as we teach students from more varied backgrounds, I think we need all the tools that we can get. And I definitely think that these application-based activities present a combination of tools that is relatively unique and very exciting for me to use in my classroom and hopefully for others to use in theirs. Well, honestly, I could go through one of these sims for basically the rest of the day, but I will not force that to happen here. I think I will go ahead and cede the floor. And I don't know if there's a way that people can share questions with me directly, but if so, I would be glad to answer them. And thank you for letting me speak today.
Thanks so much, Amanda. That was great.
Thank you.
I would like to open it up to any questions. I'm not sure if you're able to take yourself off mute, but if you are, you're welcome to do so at this time, or if you wanted to ask any specific questions to Kim about her research on experiential learning or to Amanda, please go ahead. We're opening up the floor to you guys. I will address one question that I have seen in chat. I've got a couple questions that came through about where you can find these application-based activities. Our application-based activities are available in Connect for all our Principles of Microeconomics and Macroeconomics titles. I have a question here. Maybe Amanda, you can help me with this one. In the Sims, can students select subtopics they want to do the sim on?
Sorry about that. Having a little tech issue there. At this point, we have sims that are like in their entirety, but as we are working on right now, we are working to break them down so that you could do a part of them at a time. I agree that that is a good next step for them, and I think it won't be long before we see that. What you will see right now in Connect, though, they are meant to be done all as one piece.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Let's see. Dawn, I see you have a question here about accounting. No, we do not have application-based activities for accounting yet. Follow-up question from Hanukkah is, also do the sim build on the learning, i.e. different level of difficulty for different students?
To an extent. I hate to give that answer, but to an extent. Like, for example, with some of our sims, we have applications where the activity is truncated if a student gets all the first several questions right. However, we don't have, at least at this point, we don't have any that build in the idea of doing perhaps a more advanced approach that we're seeing in the classroom or something like that. I think that's really interesting, though.
Are the questions adaptive? I don't believe they are. Amanda, can you confirm that?
Can you tell me exactly what you mean by adaptive in that way?
Hanukkah, can you expand on that? We'll just wait till she comes through.
Sure, absolutely.
Amanda, are you able to comment on accessibility and if they're AODA compliant?
As far as I know fully, I know that's something that we just recently made upgrades to the images so that screen readers could use it for all of our graphs and things like that. I believe Adam can answer that a little better than me, but I believe the answer is yes.
Thank you. And I've got another one in chat that said, would it be possible to conduct the same type of ABAs for case studies? For example, the student goes over a newspaper journal article and or a video and then work on a related ABA.
Now, the only thing I couldn't answer about that would be legality type questions, like whether there would be copyright issues or anything like that. But as far as I know, absolutely, we could have that flexibility. And truthfully, as far as I know, I think now that we've gotten a couple tens of them done on the basics, I think we're always looking for suggestions and areas where classrooms need these. So I'm sure Lula or somebody else could direct that. If you guys could direct
For sure.
any suggestions to our team, I would love it. I would love it.
For sure. Great. Any other further questions? Let's give it another minute here. Okay, I don't see anything else coming through. So I will wrap up. I'm just going to take one more look. Anything else? One last question here. How much time does a student need to devote if they start one sim?
They range from about 15 minutes to about 25 minutes. That would be the average. I do think that some of these that we're working on now that are specifically for home use, for example, reviewing graphs, maybe 5 minutes longer. But I'd say 15 to 25 minutes is pretty good.
Is it possible that we incorporate role-based experiments, market types?
That is not something that we have explored yet, but it certainly sounds like something we could. Yeah, once again, any communication on this, I would love to have. Yes, I was trying to think. I believe in another product you guys do, there are some market experiments, but in these in particular, we don't have those yet.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Kim, for sharing your research on experiential learning, and huge thanks, Amanda, for walking us through the ABAs. I think your experience in terms of actually building and having sort of the insights into, what went into the building of them is really huge. So thank you so much for being with us today. And to everyone, if you're looking to incorporate any experiential learning elements into your classroom, please feel free to reach out to your account manager. I'm sure that they will be more than happy to, set up a demo with you or walk you through what we've got available. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.